So in coaching athletes and doing technique analysis as a service on my website, sprintingworkouts.com, I've found that there are, a few things that people tend to do when they sprint which makes them run slower, but there's one thing that if you're doing this, it's definitely going to make you slower, it's going to make you more likely to get injured, and it's really the most common issue that I see in developmental sprinting. So when we think about sprinting, we have to consider the forces that we're dealing with that that we have to overcome if we want to run fast. So the biggest force we're dealing with is gravity, which is straight down. It's going to pull us straight down into the ground. No matter what we do, gravity is always pulling us down. So we have to apply force to the ground, to overcome that. The other thing to consider is equal and opposite reactions. So if my foot, as I'm running, if my foot goes into the ground moving forward relative to the ground at ground contact, what do you think is going to happen when you consider equal and opposite reactions? Well, if my foot's going down this way, it's applying force in a forward direction into the ground. That force is going to come back into my body in a backward direction, which is going to slow me down. That's a braking force. So if your foot hits the ground moving forward into the track as it hits the ground, that's going to slow you down. Not only is it going to slow you down, it's going to put a bunch of force through your ankle, your knee, and your hip, which is going to make it more likely for you to get injured. If you wonder why you have shin splints, you might want to check, is my foot crashing forward into the ground every step when I sprint? Because if it is, that's a lot of force that these lower leg muscles are going to have to deal with, and they're not, set up to deal with those forces in that direction. We are built to propel ourselves down the track, moving our body forward by striking down and back into the track. So if we watch my foot strike, you can see that as the ground is moving under me this way, I am matching the ground speed with my foot swinging into the ground so that it can be set straight down onto the track and not deal with a bunch of braking forces. If we look at this foot, let's zoom in here. Let me go right here. If we watch this foot go into the track, pay attention. Is it going to move this way or is it going to move this way into the ground? And if we think about, if the foot moves this way into the ground, if it moves forward, we're going to deal with braking forces. If it moves this way into the ground, if it moves down and back, that's going to help propel us in the opposite direction, which is forward and upward, which is what we want. If gravity's pulling us down and air resistance is pushing us back, then we need to counteract those forces by launching our body upward and forward. But if our foot moves forward into the ground, that's going to send us backwards. It's going to slow us down. If you think about when you're playing football and you want to run a route and change direction, right? Or say you want to, turn around, what do? As you're running, you smash your feet into the ground forward to slow yourself down. So since we are not changing directions and we're not trying to decelerate, we're trying to run faster, we need to do the opposite. So as we watch this foot come into the ground, what is it doing? It's coming down and back under the body. Down and back. Down and back. There's not a lot of backward movement relative to the ground. It's only relative to the body itself. The leg is going to move backward relative to the body, but we're not trying to push ourselves backward against the track. We're just trying to set it down sort of this way, very actively, focusing on striking down, down, down. Now, some people, when they do this, they will keep the leg sort of tucked like this. So when they go down, they actually extend the knee as they're doing it, and so the foot then swings forward into the ground. So sometimes if you tell an athlete just step down, they're actually going to step down and forward, which is what we do not want. So even though the foot is really not moving backward a lot against the ground in reality, sometimes to get the movement to be adequately applied to the ground, we have to tell the athlete to move the foot down and back, because relative to the body it is moving down and back, and we don't want them to tuck the leg and then just smash it forward into the ground. But the point is, when you strike the ground, you need to be very active with the strike, and you need to be very intentional about the direction that you're striking the track. So as you watch film of yourself or athletes you're working with, you need to make sure, is the foot moving in the right direction into the ground, or is it crashing forward into the ground? If we take a look at this video, we can see I am not actively striking down and back. I am passively waiting for the ground. My foot is moving forward at impact. It's moving forward into the ground. See that? See how it's moving forward? If you watch the foot, it is moving forward into the ground. And then right when I hit, boom, it collapses. Why? Because those forces are going this way and the ankle cannot deal with it. Now that ankle, calf, up into the hip is going to have to deal with those braking forces, which is going to perpetuate injury. And if you've watched my sprinting over time, I tend to have trouble with my right leg swinging it down and back into the ground, whereas my left leg is better at that. Which side do I tend to get injured in my groin and my hip? My right side. Why? Because it's crashing into the ground when I sprint. So one thing I'm having to work on is getting my glute, my hamstring, and my technique to all, get my glutes stronger, hamstring stronger, and then work on the technique to be able to actively strike down and back so I'm not dealing with those braking forces. So if you're looking at film of yourself, you want to make sure, what is my foot doing when it hits the ground? Am I trying to reach out in front of the body? Am I, passively waiting for the ground? Or am I actively striking down and back into the ground? If you strike actively down and back into the ground, you will apply propulsive forces to the ground, you will accelerate faster, you will reach a higher top speed, and you will run faster throughout the race. If instead you wait for the ground, you are passive, you set the foot down with the foot moving forward into the ground, then you're going to run slower, deal with injuries, and just have a bad time. So make sure that as you're sprinting, you're paying attention to your ground contacts, how you're contacting the ground, and that in all of your drills, all your accelerations, and all your sprints, you're emphasizing striking down and back into the ground actively so you can run fast and stay injury-free.